We, as FNAF theorists and fans, make a lot of theories and speculation about Cassidy as a character. But for anyone not in the know or needs a refresher, that's kind of a who character? Like, what do you mean one of the most important characters in the lore of the franchise is never directly mentioned a single time in any of the games? Well, it's FNAF, so it's to be expected. But I thought it would be helpful to everyone, well-versed and just starting out, to make a video exactly like this one. Here's everything we know about Cassidy, why many people think they're the one behind Ultimate Custom Night, and why they might be the Vengeful spirit. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a video. In June 2018, Scott Cawthon released Ultimate Custom Night as a sort of final thank you for the franchise and fandom around it. Obviously, this wasn't a final goodbye because Help Wanted came out not even a full year later, because, you know, this is the franchise with 7 final chapters in it. But before Ultimate Custom Night was out too long, people figured out that this was a diegetic game. It was something that was happening in-universe. We, the player, are William Afton, going through an eternal punishment set up by some ethereal force, basically being forced to relive all of our worst memories thrown at us at all times. And while that was fairly apparent, the what of this game was never really heavily debated. It's the why, the how, those aspects that really hold arguments to this day in FNAF discourse. We know for a near fact that William Afton is being tortured for all of time in this Ultimate Custom Night. But the question is, who is doing this to him? Why are they doing it to him? And how are they doing it to him? Well, obviously plenty of people want to torture William Afton, but why this particular way? As far as the who, I really only know Baba O'Reilly, but the game itself does point a few directions as to who is doing this. We hear mention from a few death quotes about a quote, one you should not have killed. But one in particular is incredibly noteworthy. From Nightmare Freddy, I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed. So whoever this one is the one creating this purgatory. Pair that with other death quotes where we can hear a whispering voice behind an animatronic voice, this incredibly rare image of a face that can appear in the vent, and this audition listing for a quote vengeful spirit, and we have our mystery creator. Whoever this vengeful spirit is, they are both childlike, the one creating Ultimate Custom Night, and has a particular grudge against William Afton. But the final nail on the coffin for their identity is the ending cutscene of the game. Going back to some of those whispered death quotes, many of them focus on torturing William Afton forever, for the rest of time. And the final cutscene you can unlock in Ultimate Custom Night is a twitching golden Freddy, slowly fading back into the distance, as if going on for the rest of time. So many people assume this vengeful spirit is the spirit inside of the golden Freddy suit, who we have very little leads on. Either it's a child we have no information about, or it's the crying child. And everything we know about the crying child's characterization doesn't really scream vengeful spirit. It kind of just screams piss baby, or just screams in general. So the stall here is that it's likely a child possessing Golden Freddy and torturing William Afton for the rest of time. But can we get any more specific on who that spirit is? Well, when the game information begins to lack, that's when we pull on other media, like the books. One book in particular, the Security Logbook. This seems rather pleasant, actually. I mean, it looks just like the music rooms when I was in high school, just with more doorways leading out. Well, it doesn't seem like there's anything threatening here for the moment. I guess I can take a rest. The question is just where. Ah, a sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Titan Mattress. I've always said there are 2 things in life that you must prioritize, and one of them is where you sleep. Seriously, when is the last time you woke up and actually felt rested? Well, I have for the past couple months because of Titan Mattress. We have the Titan Elite, which has a cooling top layer which makes your whole mattress feel like the cool side of the pillow. And when I tell you as an overheating sleeper, this is a game changer. But even if you don't want your mattress to have a cooling effect, there are other models for you. But for me, I've slept like a rock ever since. I fall asleep instantly. My wife can attest. But you don't just have to take my word for it. You can make sure you love it, because with your Titan mattress, you get a 120 night sleep trial to make sure you love your mattress, and you will, along with a limited lifetime warranty. And getting one couldn't be easier with free shipping to your door if you live in the US, and easy packaging. It comes rolled up and sealed in a box. It's actually really satisfying to open. Here's some footage of my friend opening his. So if you want to treat yourself, actually feel rested for once, and make the switch, visit titanmattress.com/rytoast, or click the link in the description and use code RYTOAST to get 30% off your order. Thanks again to Titan Mattress for sponsoring today's video. Oh, it's just here now. Perfect. Nap time. This is, unironically, probably one of the most well-known non-game pieces of the FNAF franchise. I'd argue people know about this book more than they do about some of the, actual books. Because this is more of a workbook. This is an activity book. This isn't like a short story or a novel or anything. But somehow, this is so chock full of lore, it's nuts. It's so filled with lore that it's gaslit us into assuming every piece of merchandise has lore in it. Like, when the coloring book came out, people were worried there'd be lore. Because if this had it, why not that? Very quickly after the Security Logbook released, people realized there were 3 voices in the book if you look at the text. There's the previous owner who writes in a red ink, there's faded text that can sometimes appear on the pages, and there's changed text, which appears very rarely near the end. The person writing in red ink's name is Mike, and judging from that and his opinions on the franchise, it's pretty safe to assume that Mike is Michael Afton. And he knows about Nightmare Fredbear. How many people in the franchise know about that? The person changing text in the book is often thought to be the crying child. After all, the things he says are very similar to the things we know the crying child has said. Lines like, "I'm scared, I can't see," he's acting like a little crybaby, so probably the crying child. So the big question then was, who is the faded text? Mind you, this book came out in 2017, a few weeks after FNAF 6. So at this point, we thought we had the entire franchise under our belt, and nobody seemed to line up with this faded text. Well, throughout the entire book, the faded text kept repeating the words, "my name." And using that and some changed page numbers, eventually the community had a set of paired numbers, and charting them on the word search gave us the name Cassidy. So if we assume the faded text, the one saying "my name," is named Cassidy, the question then becomes, who the hell is Cassidy? This name isn't mentioned in any of the games. Well, whoever they are, they seem to be trying to help the crying child remember something. They seem to be dead by the fact that they put "my name" on a tombstone. It is ultimately up in the air as to who Cassidy might be, but the fact that this released a few weeks after FNAF 6, a game where we have a tombstone with a hidden name on it next to all the other MCI victims, and the fact that it came out a few months before UCN, many people, myself included, assume Cassidy to be the 5th missing child incident victim, the one inside of the Golden Freddy suit. It's also thematically relevant, the fact that in life the crying child was comforted by his Fredbear plushie, and in death the spirit of Fredbear is still trying to comfort him. Not to mention that since this book, the name Cassidy has only appeared in incredibly lore-relevant locations. It was changed very quickly after it was discovered, but it's still worth noting that originally, the sprite of the princess in Princess Quest was named Cassidy. It's also incredibly noteworthy that when Scott was listing the possible scripts for the FNAF 1 movie, one of them was codenamed Cassidy, and the description of that script was that it was way too lore dense, and while the really invested fans would have loved it, it's too confusing for the general public. So that's Scott indirectly stating that the name Cassidy is incredibly lore relevant. So I think it's safe to assume that Cassidy is the Golden Freddy spirit and the one speaking in this book. So if they are the Golden Freddy spirit, and this book was released between FNAF 6 and Ultimate Custom Night, I think it's safe to assume that that is the spirit, the one you should not have killed. The Vengeful spirit, the one creating Ultimate Custom Night. But even if we have the who, we still don't have the how. How is it that Cassidy is able to reach into the mind of William Afton and torment him with his own memories? Well, that theory isn't mine, but I'll still share it because it's relevant. Fellow theorist Stormister noticed that Scraptrap's design might be purposefully like that, not just shitty in general. After all, he's not just deteriorated in FNAF 6. Things have been added to Scraptrap at this point. The theory states that FNAF 3 William Afton was desperately trying to repair the Springtrap suit after the FNAF 3 fire, and to do so he pulled on the only other suit with similar technology, Fredbear. After all, they're the 2 Springlock suits of Fredbear's Family Diner. But as we know, spirits in Five Nights at Freddy's seem particularly attached to the metal of their animatronics, so taking pieces of Fredbear, which is possessed by Cassidy, and affixing it onto himself could theoretically take parts of Cassidy's spirit and attach it to himself 2. It would be in this moment that Cassidy's spirit becomes attached to William Afton, and as we know from the books, it's shown that people who have an aptitude for agony or an intense connection with somebody's mind is able to send that person into a living nightmare that they can't escape from using that person's memories. So whether or not Cassidy is apt with agony, just the connection alone is theoretically enough to trap William Afton in his own mind. But if that's the how, then we still aren't sure on the why. At least a better why. Sure, yes, Cassidy was killed by William Afton, but William Afton killed like 20 people. Is there a particular reason why Cassidy is more vengeful than any other victim? I think we have the information to imply this. A few times throughout this franchise, Golden Freddy is depicted adjacent to depictions of drowning. Notably, in FNAF AR, one of his costumes is being chained up and underwater, and most notably, in both Ultimate Custom Night and FNAF World, we walk the Fredbear sprite into a red lake, one of the endings being called the Drowning Ending. Not to mention, in Help Wanted, you can occasionally see Dreadbear exiting the Red Lake. So there are weirdly a lot of instances where Golden Freddy is mentioned around drowning in a red lake. Why could that be? Well, in the first FNAF novel, William Afton directly describes what it's like to die by Springlock, and in it, he mentions that the main reason people die is drowning in their own blood due to the puncture wounds the Springlocks give you. And how apt of an allegory is drowning in a red lake to drowning in your own blood? Pair all of this with the fact that Golden Freddy is a Springlock suit of Fredbear, and I think we've cracked it. Keeping in mind that most of the evidence we've described so far is just straight fact with a little speculation on top. Let's throw all our ingredients into the oven and start heavily speculating on the building blocks we've made. The 5th victim of the missing child incident, Cassidy, was not killed like the previous 4. They were killed and then later stuffed into animatronic suits, but Cassidy was put alive in the chest of the Fredbear Springlock suit. And once trapped inside, the Springlocks were triggered, killing Cassidy in one of the most brutal and agonizing ways that this franchise can think of, drowning them in their own blood. A particularly heinous way to go, one that is uniquely agonizing and has now created an immortal enemy in their spirit. But for now, all Cassidy could do about it was ruminate and brood and threaten anybody who got too close to the Golden Freddy suit. They were trapped in that immovable suit, but eventually William's own desperation made him make his biggest mistake. In seeking out spare parts to repair himself, he found that Fredbear suit, took parts of it, and added it to himself. In doing so, bringing Cassidy's spirit over. All Cassidy had to do was lay in wait for William Afton's weakest moment to fully overtake him, and it wouldn't be too much longer until that opportunity arose, when his old business partner Henry Emily trapped and incinerated him, trying to have everybody move on. But it was in that moment where William Afton's spirit was its weakest, about to move on, that Cassidy struck, entering his mind, using his own memories against him, and giving him that very same torture he gave to others right back to him. They knew moving on was too good for William Afton. He needed to suffer for as long as they could keep him, technically keeping his mind and spirit in our world, but only to suffer for as long as they could manage it. So that's Cassidy. Now, to be clear, I'm not an end-all be-all, and I don't decide what is true and isn't true. I tried to stay mostly factual before the pitch, but obviously you need to make some speculation to talk about anything with Five Nights at Freddy's. This is all still my opinion, but I tried to list all of the relevant evidence we have of Cassidy in this video, so you can make your own decision. Cassidy as the Vengeful Spirit is not the only theory. Some people think it's the Crying Child. Some people think it's Andrew, who's a character that's even less mentioned in the games. Absolutely never. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this was helpful. In the meantime, speaking of Springlock suits, last week I made a video on the possibility that the Toys and Wizards are also Springlock suits. You can find that video right here if you're interested. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.